In this episode, we talk about the recent mass killings of stray dogs in Telangana and what a ground report reveals about it. We also discuss the tragic death of Maharashtra Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar, who passed away after his plane crashed in Baramati yesterday. But we begin today by talking about the historic free trade agreement signed between India and the European Union and the ways in which it would actually benefit the two sides. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. After nearly 20 years of negotiations, India and the European Union finally signed a free trade agreement this week, a deal which they hope will deepen economic ties and drive shared prosperity. Here's Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Union, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressing the media after the talks concluded on Tuesday.
We did it. We delivered the mother of all deals. We are creating a market of 2 billion people. And this is the tale of two giants, the world's second and fourth largest economies. Two giants who choose partnership in a true win-win fashion. A strong message that cooperation is the best answer to global challenges.
यह एफटीए भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच इन्वेस्टमेंट को बूस्ट करेगा, नई इनोवेशन पार्टनरशिप बनाएगा और वैश्विक स्तर पर सप्लाई चेन को मजबूत करेगा. यानी
Now this deal comes at a time when both India and the EU have been affected by the Trump administration's steep tariffs. It's worth noting that once this agreement is vetted and ratified, it will eliminate duties on about 99.5% of Indian exports, including on textiles and gems, and will reduce tariffs on roughly 97% of EU goods like cars and wine. So to talk about what this deal actually means for both sides and to highlight some of its key provisions, the Indian Express's Ravi Misra joins us. Ravi, India has signed trade deals with the UK, New Zealand and Oman recently. But tell us, in what way does this deal stand out? What makes this deal, as they're describing it, the mother of all deals?
So essentially, it stands out because of the size of the market of India and the European Union. The depth of the coverage, it covers majority of the tariff lines. 97% of the tariff for the EU has been removed. 99% of the tariffs for us has gone to zero, or it will go to zero in 10 years. So the size of the deal is large. It is consequential for creating jobs in our labor-intensive sectors. For them, their automobile sector has got a significant quota, and that is going to change the nature of trade between these two big partners.
And for those who are not entirely familiar with how exports work, can you break this down and tell us what it means when we say that tariffs have been removed on 99% of Indian goods?
So let's take two countries who have not signed an FTA. Okay. For instance, India. India has a tariff of 150% and 100% in some categories on automobiles. India has huge tariffs on wine, on whiskey. So these are traditionally protected items. When we sign a deal with a UK, EU or any other country, we decide that some of our products are going to enter their market without any taxes. Tariff is essentially taxes, any duty. And some of their products are going to come in without any taxes. That immediately gives a boost and an incentive to exporters to start manufacturing, to start selling, and that supply chain starts building up. It is very, very crucial that India, gets into more and more agreements, especially because we are facing a humongous pressure from the US, 50% tariff. So if the tariffs go away, it just means that two countries are able to trade faster. Both countries have decided that the red tape will go down, non-tariff barriers, hurdles will go down, and there will be more volumes engaged. That is what it essentially means.
And Ravi, we understand that these trade talks first began in 2007, 18 years ago. But most of the progress, of course, was made in the past 6 months. So Could you talk about what took so long and what has made it possible now?
So we have traditionally been a very protectionist country. That's well known.
Basically, we don't want a lot of goods from other countries to be sold here because that we feel will impact the domestic companies.
In certain categories, because the West is developed. The West has been industrialized for decades. But for us, we have to protect our, small MSME industries so that they can come up to a level where they can compete with, the German cars, the French wine, champagne. And these are all established products and categories in the world sphere. So we were always a protectionist country. What has changed from 2007 to 2026 is that we have started opening up, and we have started opening up very fast because we have realized that by not getting into agreements, by not lowering our tariffs, we were essentially missing out on getting into the global value chain, which China has done, which Vietnam has done. Vietnam signed a trade deal with the European Union in 2019. And we know what Vietnam is today. It is attracting capital, it is producing jobs, and it's growing really fast because of these trade deals.
And so tell us specifically, what is India getting out of this? What are the goods that won't face any tariffs now?
Okay, so the list of essentially 10 products which will see a significant advantage for us. These include marine products, which without FTA is tariffed at 26%, textile, which is at 12%, footwear, it's also around 10 to 12%, chemicals. So these are products which really creates jobs. And these are the products where China got into really early. It kind of became the hub of manufacturing. So these are the products where we are going to get an advantage. And Europe is a huge market. It's a market where people send quality products. So once we have that opening, we will start producing those, high quality products. And if we are able to compete in the European Union market, we can essentially compete in any other country. So it gives a humongous incentive for our manufacturers to, set up plants, and that also attracts investment.
Right, and many of these things, especially textiles and footwear, a lot of medium, small and micro enterprises deal in that. And like you said, this creates a lot of jobs. But the other thing, that this trade agreement aims to do is significantly boost trade by reducing tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Talk about what that does for India.
So we're one of the world's biggest pharma exporters, right? And a lower tariff on pharma for us, again, does the same thing that it has done for other countries in the past. It opens up a market for us. We already have established industry. We have testing. A lot of US regulatory authorities have given approvals to Indian manufacturing units across the country. And we already have that supply chain well established. We import a lot of our APIs from China. That is a vulnerability. But at the same time, once a big market like EU opens up, our problem in any other country will be solved. We will be able to easily export, say, in the West Asia. We'll be able to also export in the US because there's a clause, and this was a clause in the UK, that if UK and EU regulatory authorities approve our pharma products, whereas other countries consider it, enough for those products to come into their countries.
Right, and when we talk about challenges, one big challenge that exporters face are just the number of restrictions and regulations that they have to comply with. And this is especially the case when it comes to food and chemicals, right? How big of a hurdle is that going to be for India?
It's the biggest challenge for India and for everybody else, because we keep saying that this is the mother of all deals, but EU is also mother of all regulations. In 2007, they came out with this regulation called REACH, which started impacting our chemical exports and everybody else's chemical, not just India. Again, in 2016, this year, CBAM has already come into effect, which will start affecting our metal exports. And then there is Industrial Accelerator Act, which is going to come in 2028. There is EU deforestation legislation, which is going to come into effect. So there are a number of regulations through which EU essentially externalizes its standards to the world. So in a manner, like we are seeing that US is using tariffs, similarly, EU is using regulation. They have enormous impact on the world. All of these regulations are challenged. Recently Indonesia called it, took EU to WTO. US has a problem with a lot of tech regulations that EU is bringing. India has already, our ministers, they were regularly vocal about CBAM. So it's very important for us to address these regulations in a trade deal, because this is perhaps the only opportunity, a legal opportunity that we get to get some certainty from the EU.
And you mentioned CBAM, and that, of course, is the carbon tax that the EU began implementing from the first of this year. And this especially impacts aluminium, iron, and steel. And these are all things that India exports to the EU in a lot of quantity. And this, again, one imagines is going to be a big challenge for us.
Absolutely. India is the second largest steel producer. It's miles away from China, but it is the second largest steel producer. And we have these plants in small places. Like, I come from Bokaro. There's a steel plant in Bokaro. There's a steel plant in Jamshedpur. All these small areas have steel plants, and it's very essential for our MSMEs, because, there are other products that go into these plants, and there's a huge pressure to decarbonize. This is what EU essentially wants.
Yeah, basically what the EU wants is for these companies to reduce their carbon emissions, reduce how much they end up polluting the environment.
Yeah. But the problem is, our industries have pointed out that EU is going to use this as a non-tariff barrier, because what EU is troubled by is a huge inflow of Chinese products. US has also been, whatever US is doing at the moment is in response to Chinese overcapacity. And a lot of other Western countries fear that India would be the next China. There'll be flood of exports from India, and they are coming out with ways and means to restrict these products. But when you bring trade and environment in the same bracket, in the same regulation, that starts creating problem, because for environment issues to be addressed, there is a separate UN body. For trade issues, there's a separate body. But then, these lines are being blurred, and that is what we are essentially troubled with.
And you mentioned China, and when it comes to exports, both India and the EU rely heavily on China, although countries all over really have been trying to reduce their dependence on the country. But how much was China a factor in this deal?
It's the silent, accelerator, if I can, put it in that way, because EU wants to cut its reliance on China. India wants to cut its reliance on China. So what better way than an FTA, where there is an integration, there's a service sector integration, there's a manufacturing service sector integration. In fact, the manner in which this could happen is still under discussion. There is a separate negotiations that are going on EU's investment into non-service sector, which means manufacturing. So that investment negotiations will happen after the deal comes into effect, and the deadline for that negotiations to start is 2 years after the deal comes into effect. So that is a larger thing that both the countries are still working on, and that should essentially cut our reliance.
And talk about what the EU gets out of this. What are the things that they'll be able to sell more of in India now?
Straightforward gain for them is automobile and wines. We're not even getting into other products. The tariffs on automobiles, the European automobiles, will come down from 110% to 10% over a period of 10 years. This is a very ambitious, this was one of the most aggressive ask by the European Union. And in fact, this was the stumbling block in 2013. This was the reason India was not willing to take in automobile from European Union, and that essentially broke down the negotiations at that point of time. So we are now a mature economy. There is room for more competition. So we have, given them a quota of 250,000 automobiles, and that is a big advantage for them. And of course, wine, a lot of agriculture products, apples, and there are various other products, that are going to come in, and their production will rise.
And earlier we were talking about tariffs on pharmaceuticals coming down. But what this deal also does is grant European companies easier access to India's growing market for high-end medical devices and technologies. It basically eliminates tariffs on nearly all EU pharmaceutical products and over 90% of optical, medical, and surgical equipment. So that's something that will benefit the European Union. But besides all this, one thing I suppose we should remember is that all this is just an opportunity, right? Sure, a range of our products won't be taxed in countries within the European Union. But if India has to take advantage of this deal, it will have to produce good quality products. Otherwise, no one will buy them. So talk about that a bit. How does India plan to streamline that?
So this is one of the biggest problems that India faces. We are getting more and more deals done. In fact, we signed a deal with Japan, and at that time we thought that our textile, our apparel, these products will sell in Japan, but it never did. So our share of exports to Japan did not go up, and which is considered as a case study. So what I'm trying to say is, as if we are not competitive, if our imports, if there are a lot of restriction on imports, on intermediary products and various other hurdles in manufacturing, all these FTAs will not yield any result. Instead, there will be a import pressure, which is one of the risks that we are currently facing. There's a Niti Aayog report that came out in the first quarter of this ongoing financial year. Imports from FTA countries went up by 60%, and that is not good news for us.
So basically, other countries are benefiting more from these deals.
Absolutely. Because we are a high tariff country. When our average tariffs goes down from 12% to 3%, they are bound to get benefit from it. But their average tariffs, at least in the Western countries, are usually 2%, 3%, and they have just gone down to zero. So they are always going to have a bigger advantage. In fact, whoever is more competitive is going to have a bigger advantage. These are just, duty negotiations where complementarities can come in. How can two countries trade and benefit? But taking advantage is a whole different ballgame.
And now, shifting from global trade concerns, we turn to a crisis unfolding in Telangana. Over the past month, the state has seen mass killings of stray dogs across 4 districts. According to the Stray Animals Foundation of India, nearly 900 dogs have allegedly been killed by locals, most notably in Jagatayal and in the village of Yacharam. These incidents come at a time when the Supreme Court has raised concerns about dog bite cases and has said that states could be held liable to pay heavy compensation in dog bite incidents, and has also observed that feeding stray dogs on public streets should not be permitted. Now, to understand what led to these mass killings, my colleague Ichha Sharma speaks to the Indian Express's Nikhila Henry, who reports on Telangana for the paper.
Nikhila, although these killings have taken place in other parts as well, we'll focus on Yacharam, which is the village you visited. So, could you tell our listeners a bit about this place and what exactly happened there?
Yacharam is 50 to 60 kilometers away from Hyderabad. If you were to take a cab and just drive out of Hyderabad, you'll reach Yacharam within an hour or so. Yacharam is also not a very rural, area. Though it's a village, it's semi-urbanized. And there are families who are sick and tired of having a dog menace around. So for people in Yacharam, I think that the choice is between having the dogs around and getting bitten and killing them and saving at least some people from dog bites. So it has come to that in that particular village. Yacharam is a very small village, though it's semi-urbanized and all that. It's a very small place.
Right, and you highlight how government data shows that there were over 100 dog bite cases in and around the village in a single year. So how serious is this number given that the village is semi-urbanized?
In Yacharam, there were 109 cases of dog bites which were recorded between January 2025 and January 2026. The number of dog bite cases from around 24 villages in and around Yacharam, that was 667. So the number of cases from the small village was 9 dog bites per month, which is a huge number. And for the villagers, the option for treatment is basically a primary health center, which is there in Yacharam. So I went to the primary health center and we basically got the data from the primary health center as to how many cases of dog bites have been reported. So we have to understand that these are the reported cases of dog bites which have come to one particular primary health center. So if there are unreported cases of dog bites, or if the villagers have decided to go to other medical facilities, we wouldn't know the exact number. But whatever be it, 109 cases of dog bites in a year, that is from January 2025 to January 2026, is quite a lot, because that amounts to 9 cases per month for a very small village. So here, the semi-urban nature of the village, which has kirana stores, which has a primary health center, which has a police station, all these things, do not really matter because dogs are everywhere and people are tired of getting bitten.
And Nikhila, in your reportage, you note how when you spoke to the nurses, they describe cases involving children with deep wounds. So, what everyday risks are villagers actually describing when they say that they are tired of dogs?
Yeah, so when I went to the primary health center, the nurses there took out a ledger, which was a very fat ledger, which had a lot of cases of these dog bites. Some of these cases were basically of children who were bitten by dogs in very brutal ways. Like in one particular case, a child was bitten on the eyebrow and the brow had come out completely. And in another case, a 35-year-old male was bitten on the feet, on the calf, and the calf muscle had completely torn off. The majority of the cases which come to the primary health center are referred out to a bigger center, is what the nurses in the PHC told me. That means that the number of cases, second degree and third degree cases, which are like severe cases of dog bites, which have to be treated with sutures and with dressing and everything, they refer it to hospitals which are outside the village. So it is important to note that while children and young people are the ones who are the most affected, even older people, within the age group of 50 to 60 have been bitten by dogs. Such cases were also there at the PHC. So when they say that they're tired of dogs, it means that they know people who have been victims of dog bites over the years. So as far as the PHC is concerned, they have been treating these severe cases as well as normal cases, regularly.
Right, and what's striking is how getting rid of stray dogs even became an election promise during panchayat polls, right?
Yeah, so here we have to understand that the unit of Yacharam village is together opposing dogs. So their only agenda is to get rid of dogs somehow. And there is another side to it where there are animal rights activists and the police, for example, who say that don't kill the dogs because it is a punishable offense under both BNS and also the Prevention of Animal Cruelty Act of 1960. So the society is divided into dog lovers and dog haters in Yacharam. And that becomes a very difficult situation to handle because in Yacharam, what one of the animal rights activists told me was that they came to know about the dog killings in that village because a pet parent called them up and said that my dog is missing. So they went in search of the pet dog and realized that, scores of dogs were killed. So according to the animal rights activists, at least 100 dogs were killed in the village of Yacharam and were buried. But the police say that they have recovered only 30 carcasses. No matter what it is, the numbers may vary from account to account, but it is very clear that dogs were killed in this particular village. And the dogs were killed by lethal injection by local pest controllers is what the animal rights activists actually told us.
And lastly, Nikhila, as you mentioned, that regardless of public anger, mass killings of stray dogs would still be illegal, right? So how have the government officials responded to this?
Okay, so as far as the state government, the Congress-led state government of Telangana is concerned, they are very clear that they will not allow, dog killings to happen. This is despite the fact that sarpanches supported by all political parties, including the Congress, the BRS and the BJP, have ordered for dog killings in their own villages as an election promise. So election promise in the sense that it was in December 2025 that panchayat elections were held in Telangana. And many of the panchayat sarpanches had promised that they will put an end to the dog menace in their respective areas. So to put an end to the dog menace, the only thing which has come to their mind is to kill the dogs. And even the Supreme Court has mentioned this, that, sterilization and leaving the dogs where they were does not actually help the people because dog bites continue to be there. Vaccination doesn't help because even in the case of vaccination, sometimes, there could be rabies infection. despite vaccination. So people are really tired of dogs. And whenever people have a mass sentiment, it is very normal for elected representatives to hold on to that sentiment and get votes. And they wanted to keep their promise because they themselves and their families would also be affected by the dog menace, right? So that's what had happened in Yacharam. Yeah.
And in the end, we talk about a development that has shaken the state of Maharashtra. Yesterday, Maharashtra Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar died in a plane crash while he was on his way to hold 4 political rallies for the upcoming Zilla Parishad polls. In a government release, the Civil Aviation Ministry said there were 5 people on board the aircraft, including 2 crew members. All occupants of the aircraft suffered fatal injuries. Now, the crash took place at Baramati, which is an uncontrolled airfield. This means there is no formal air traffic control tower, and the air traffic information is provided by instructors or pilots from flying training organizations operating there. The chartered flight, a Bombardier Learjet 45, had been airborne for around 35 minutes before it crashed and was operated by the Delhi-based private jet charter company VSR Ventures, also known as VSR Aviation. While the Civil Aviation Ministry has released the details available so far, including a timeline of events leading up to the crash, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AIB, is now probing the incident. For those who may not already know, Ajit Pawar was the longest-serving Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, though not consecutively. He held the position 6 times across different governments, serving under Chief Ministers Prithviraj Chavan, Devendra Fadnavis, Uddhav Thackeray, and Eknath Shinde. He is survived by his wife Sunetra Pawar and his 2 sons Jay and Parth Pawar. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Shubhangi Khapre, she told us more about him.
Ajit Pawar, in his current position, was the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra. He was leading the NCP, which was a breakaway faction of the undivided NCP. He had a majority of MLAs with him, and a sizable party was with Ajit Pawar in that sense. If you look at his politics, Ajit Pawar was groomed under Sharad Pawar, who was a veteran politician, and with a very shrewd veteran politician with vast experience of 6 to 7 decades of politics. So Ajit Pawar rose to rank from grassroots actually. Ajit Pawar's strength was his deep understanding of rural Maharashtra, because essentially he always focused more in his initial years of politics. He was always grounded in Baramati and always worked in the villages, always worked in the rural belt of sugar cooperative belt, that is Western Maharashtra. If we were to talk about the irrigation sector, he exactly had on his fingertips which irrigation project is in which district, which taluka. Similarly, he was very well adept with the agriculture, the details, the nuances, the crop culture, the crop cultivations, and he personally did farming in his native village in Baramati. Secondly, he was a very able administrator, somebody who has handled multiple portfolios, very important portfolios, someone who's worked with several chief ministers, both in Congress, NCP, as well as now we can say Mahayuti. So is a very versatile politician in that sense, who could accommodate himself, who could adjust to the politics of different ideologies. So if I have to say, if anybody understands Maharashtra other than Sharad Pawar, I would say Ajit Pawar, because Ajit Pawar used to travel across Maharashtra.
And Shubhangi, talk about the kind of vacuum he has left behind for the NCP. What kind of a situation does the party find itself in now, considering, like you said, most of the MLAs were with him?
It's a very, very big loss. And I would say it's absolutely the party, the family is in a state of shock. So is Maharashtra in a state of shock. Because irrespective of your ideologies, irrespective of your politics, I think when it comes to us passing away of a young leader, I'm saying young leader because young politicians, 66 is quite a young age as far as Indian politics is concerned. and someone who was so proactive in the field. Just day before yesterday, he was there with Chief Minister at Nanded attending a function. Yesterday, he was in cabinet meeting, and he was on his way for campaigning for the Zilla Parishad elections. He had a long roadmap what he has to do for the next 10 days, and somebody with a very bright future, ahead. And also the entire responsibility of not only his NCP, but also NCP SP, which is led by his uncle, rested on his shoulder to a large extent, because Ajit Pawar is one politician who had a very strong network with masses, who across the political parties also his equations were very cordial with every leader. I mean, there were differences when it came to campaign. There were bitter fights, there were bitter charges, they traded charges and counter charges against each other. But he had personal rapport with each and every leader who's who of Maharashtra, and also at national level. I think now for the party it's going to be a very, very big loss, because he was a rallying point for all the MLAs. Now, there's going to be a leadership vacuum in the NCP. I mean, now we don't know who takes up that mantle and what kind of arrangements Sharad Pawar makes or how it's worked out between the two parties. But yes, for NCP factions, the identity was Ajit Pawar. Though there are very many senior leaders who have also worked with Sharad Pawar as well as with Ajit Pawar. But that leadership role, that aggression, that political understanding of state, and the ability to do the field work, 24/7, that was his strength. And now with Ajit Pawar's going away, I think for NCP, it's a big question mark, because who will be the next leader within the NCP who can be acceptable to one and all remains a question mark. Now, whether the NCP and Sharad Pawar's NCP, they come together, they join, and they come up with a new leadership from the family or outside, these are the questions which will have to be answered in next few days. The family will have to take a call on this.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Ichha Sharma and me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.